Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
All right, here we go. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana Harrah's Resort Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. I'm Mike Gill. Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. And I don't want any more Jim Mora Sr. gifts. I've had enough of those this year. We'll talk about that and more. Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. Get his observations on the Eagles' win. They, of course, knock off the Saints 40-29. They do it with a solid ground game, and obviously there's a lot more into this one here. 5-6, they are now just a half game out in the wild card race of the NFC. Andrew, happy Monday, my man. How are you?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
All right, doing well. We talked on Thursday. We both had a good feeling about this game. It probably went better than we both thought here, and they do it behind just a dominant performance from the offensive line. I don't know how much more praise you could give this group, but what you see up front, and did you think that was really the difference in the game?
That was one of the more dominant offensive line performances that I've seen in a number of years. I mean, it all starts up front with Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. Those guys are people movers. Jordan Mailata really establishing that dominance in his matchup, just an overall physicality, smash mouth style. And I think it's starting to really, I think it's putting teams on notice that the Eagles offensive line, and they're going to win in the trenches, and that's going to be sort of their identity. I think they've really found their identity. And, I mean, Jack Driscoll's done a phenomenal job actually stepping in at right guard in place of Brandon Brooks. So a lot of people forget that they're doing this without Brandon Brooks and Isaac Seumalo, two starters. So, I mean, it's very impressive what they're doing. And, you know, it all starts up front with Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson.
Andrew, obviously the run game over 200 yards again, and you see the way you're talking about the offensive line here. Jordan Howard might miss some time, and I'm wondering what you saw from Sanders. If they lose Howard, how could that affect the run game?
Well, Jordan Howard is a tone setter type of running back. He gets north and south in a hurry. He wears on defenses. And obviously they have the best of both worlds with all three running backs in Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, and Boston Scott, who all present different challenges to defenses. They all have a different skill set. And Jordan Howard was that thunder. And when he left the game, you know, I thought Miles Sanders did a decent job really running between the tackles, and he didn't do a whole lot of dancing. And Boston Scott's a good complimentary back as well. They're fortunate enough to have a number of running backs in the stable that can pick up the slack. Obviously, Jordan Howard has a knee sprain, as Nick Sirianni said today, and will likely not be available this week. We'll probably more likely see him December 5th against the Jets. But, I mean, they have enough guys to continue this trend of running the football. And I have to be encouraged with what you saw from Miles Sanders in his first game back, 94 yards in his return.
Hey, Andrew, Sirianni was asked today about the production or lack thereof, really, from the wide receivers. Now, I know they run the ball so much, but, you know, at some point, would there be some concern that, hey, all right, you've done this a couple of weeks, that teams are going to start to game plan for you a little differently. Are they a one-trick pony, or is this a team that can do more things?
Well, I mean, they've proven that they're able to run the ball effectively on what used to be the number one rush defense in the NFL. So if they can run against the Saints, they can run against everybody. Now, you do have to find balance. And I will say the one caveat that could limit this team's ceiling is the lack of another weapon opposite Devontae Smith. Obviously, they could use a veteran there. But, I mean, right now you're looking at Quez Watkins, 1 target, 0 catches. Jalen Reagor, 3 targets, 1 catch for negative yardage. That can't continue. Obviously, teams are going to look to take away Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith once they know that there's not another receiving threat on the roster they need to really plan for. That's going to be a problem. But I think right now, with the running game going as well as it is, Jalen running the football, they also have to account for him, obviously. And you know, you got Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith. I think it's a healthy recipe right now. But when you start to face these the upper echelon teams of the NFL, when you look at that, talking about wild card situation, they're going to be able to take away your two receiving options, and they're going to make Jalen Reagor, Quez Watkins, Greg Ward, those type of players beat you.
Yeah, I know that, you look at this offense and it's really humming out on the ground right now. I want to, last week I thought that Jalen Hurts took a big step forward as a passer, but what did he do in this particular game? You look at the passing stats, you're not going to say, hey, look at all the yards, but what was he able to do as a passer in this game that impressed you?
I thought he made some nice throws that he wouldn't make 5 or 6 weeks ago. There was also a couple that got wiped away due to drops. I think that he's really, it's not necessarily the quantity, it's the quality of the completions and throws that he's making that are really notable in his gradual progression each week that we've talked about last week as well. And you have to be encouraged. I mean, the numbers aren't going to be gaudy, right? 147 yards passing doesn't necessarily indicate that they're going to take to the aerial attack, moving forward. That's on the back burner right now. But what I'm seeing from Jalen Hurts is he's making the proper reads. Still needs to see the field a little bit better. He is leaving some plays on the field, but I think he's working through his progressions, letting routes develop, and his ball placement is vastly improved from what it was in the past. But if the running game's working, I mean, it behooves the Eagles to stick with that until a team shows that they can stop it. But I think that Jalen Hurts has shown enough right now that should eliminate some questions whether or not he can make all the throws. I think he's proven that he can do that and that he's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, Andrew DiCecco's with us. There's so much to unpack from this game on both sides of the ball. We'll look at the defense in just a second. I want to go and take a look at, again, the offensive line, something up there again. You got Mailata and Dickerson together on that side. I want to get your take. I know this year Seumalo is not coming back, but do you leave Dickerson at left guard? Do you move him to center? What is his future as a player in this league? I mean, him and Mailata together is very intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to like the way that Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson are playing off one another. I would keep that personally. If it's me, I would keep that in place, and I would think of moving maybe Isaac Seumalo to center, or you can even look at Nate Herbig. I think that they have a strong left side for the foreseeable future, and that's working. And they're blowing guys off the ball, and they're establishing that gritty, tough, nasty mentality that teams have to account for when they play the Eagles. And I would keep that as is. But they do have some options once Jason Kelce does decide to retire. And the top of my list would be, and the one that would make the most sense would be Isaac Seumalo.
Yep, I'm kind of with you on that. I mean, the thought of having Dickerson and Mailata next to each other there for the next, 8 to 10 years, those two guys, man, they are fun to watch. I've never really found myself, Andrew, zoning in on watching the guard and tackle. I'll watch them for a series. Those two guys are almost as fun as watching like a great running back run.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch. I mean, those two guys are in concert with one another. They're in constant unison, and they're just blowing guys off the ball. And there's nothing better than I enjoy personally when I watch football. I'm really into trench play, and I like watching, just the sheer dominance from the Eagles' offensive line and defensive line, just winning their matchups and establishing a dominance. And that's winning football. If you can run the football and you can rush the passer, I mean, that's a winning recipe for when it gets colder. In the colder months, you have 3 running backs you could rotate, and you have an offensive line that's just so cohesive right now and firing on all cylinders. I mean, the Eagles have to really be pleased with how things have transpired after, kind of stumbling out of the gates early on.
All right, let's go to defense. A lot of notes on this side of the ball, Andrew. TJ Edwards, 1-year contract extension. Let's start with him. And just adding him to the defense since week 8, as you tweeted out earlier, he's got 44 tackles, 3 for loss, broke up 3 passes, has a fumble recovery, had an interception yesterday. What has Edwards done to change the complexion of this defense?
Well, he inserting him into that second level just added a physicality, a tenacity, a take-no-prisoners mentality, as I wrote about on InsideTheBirds.com. Teams aren't able to just run up the middle and pick up 6-8 yards at a time like they were when they had Alex Singleton out there and Eric Wilson. he's a guy that's going to come downhill, attack blockers, flow to the football, and he's always around the football, if you notice, and he's improving in his coverage, right? I mean, that was always one of the biggest hindrances from keeping him off the field was he's a liability in coverage. Is he all of a sudden going to be a Darius Leonard or something like that? No, I'm not suggesting that, but he is a player that is a competent starter right now and has really added a physical element to that defense. And it's a shame about Davion Taylor, who is likely going to go on IR, as you heard Nick Sirianni say earlier, because he was really taking strides in the right direction and really starting to come into his own. Now it's probably going to be Alex Singleton, which is something to watch for because teams have run at him with success.
Yeah. There's a lot more there because I guess the next question would be, you mentioned Taylor. He was a third-round pick. Now you're right. He looks like he's going to be out for at least 3 weeks. One of those weeks, I think, is a bye, so he might only miss 2 games in there. But they signed Edwards. They seem to like Taylor. We don't think they have fixed their linebacking problem, though, do we?
I mean, I would hope not. I mean, those guys have proven that, and T.J. Edwards can start, and he's a competent NFL starter. Davion Taylor, to me, is a good third linebacker, a specialty type player that can contribute situationally. He has a lot of intriguing and tantalizing traits. Once everything comes together, you're going to have a big time player there that can sort of be deployed against certain matchups. And then Sean Bradley and Patrick Johnson have really emerged as core special teamers. So you do have a contingent of linebackers that you can go into the offseason with and plan for, but you need that bona fide starter, a guy that really is that has a skill set that lends itself to the current NFL landscape and that they could cover sideline to sideline. They don't really have a lot of limitations in coverage, and they're going to, aggressively pursue the football. I mean, you need one of those guys that can sort of eliminate those hybrid tight ends and running backs out of the backfield, like the Austin Ecklerds who you saw, that with the impact that players like that can have on a game. You need a linebacker that can sort of get rid of all that and eliminate that.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are wondering, hey, they need a linebacker. They sign a linebacker. They have Taylor, and you're thinking they don't think they already have fixed this problem. We'll see. That's interesting. Defensively, you wrote about this over at InsideTheBirds.com, which is, some of the kind of, I guess you could talk about the pressure, what Gannon did to kind of mix his blitzes up. He showed a little creativity on Sunday.
Yeah, and you heard Trevor Siemian, which I tweeted out. Trevor Siemian after the game said, yeah, they showed some different looks that we hadn't seen before. And I tweeted that out not to make it seem like, hey, the Eagles, they threw a wrench at Trevor Siemian. It's more so to drive home the point that Jonathan Gannon is making changes. He's modifying his scheme. And that's something that it might not be, you might see incremental changes week to week, but you are seeing someone who's evolving as a first-year coordinator, learning how to scheme around his personnel and put players in position to be successful and thrive. And, I mean, I thought that they would get a little bit more pressure with their front four, that they have a lot of, a lot of high-end guys in there, high-priced guys. So you would like to see that a little bit more consistent. But, I mean, they did what they were supposed to do against a beat-up offensive line. And Avonte Maddox coming on that blitz on that 3rd and 11 on that first drive that forced the punt, that really set the tone for the entire game.
Well, I thought the play that Edwards, too, man, that interception, of course, Slay's interception, but, you're seeing now that the linebackers aren't a complete liability. Here's the question, I guess. You're watching this. You're seeing that they're applying more pressure. They're mixing their blitzes. Can they do this against higher quality quarterbacks, or is this just a byproduct of, hey, Trevor Siemian struggled yesterday?
Well, that has yet to be seen, because now we saw it against in the Denver Broncos and Teddy Bridgewater, and we saw it obviously yesterday with Trevor Siemian. This is sort of a new look defense. So, I mean, we're really not going to – I mean, there's not – look at the rest of the schedule here. There's not a lot of guys you can really measure yourself against. I mean, these are guys that you would think that these defensive players, they should get the best of, given the veterans that they have on that unit and the pass rush prowess and just the overall experience. They should win these matchups in the coming weeks. You're not really going to know how they're going to fare unless they creep in and snag that wild card spot and are really put to the test. I mean, they might see Dak Prescott the last week of the season. It depends on how things shake out. But, I mean, I think that, every good quarterback tends to look human once you apply some pressure on them. And I think Jonathan Gannon learned some harsh lessons in the first half of the season when he came under intense scrutiny.
Yeah.
And I think he's sort of finding out how to use his personnel and deploy guys. So it'll be interesting to see how they look against some more of the competent quarterbacks and how they measure up.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the best guy they got left, I don't know, Daniel Jones. They got him twice. They got Tyler Henneke.
They might see Joe Flacco. They might see Joe Flacco. I don't know.
Right. I mean, there's not really a guy on this list that we might not find out that answer unless they make the playoffs, right?
Exactly. We're not going to know. I mean, it should be fun to see the scheme sort of evolve against some of these lower tier quarterbacks in the coming weeks, but they're not really going to be tested until unless they get that wild card spot.
All right, you tweeted out something yesterday. I'm glad I'm scrolling through your timeline, and you did it yesterday, and it just remembered that I wanted to talk to you about this, about Boston Scott as a kick return. Rieger back there, he does not play to his 40-time speed at all, and he is just, I don't want to say incompetent at kick return and punt return, but they got to think about making a change at both spots.
Yeah, I mentioned something to somebody recently that it seems like when Jalen Reagor gets moving, it's almost like he's running in sand.
Yeah,
you don't
does.
see
It's
that
weird.
burst, that acceleration, and he makes some baffling decisions that you obviously cannot afford to make if you're a team that's vying for a playoff spot. All these things really factor into the outcomes of games, and he's lucky that they were playing a banged up Saints team because some of his decisions to take kicks out of the end zone, his decision making and his overall burst and explosion are not what you would expect to see from a first round receiver that was drafted with that draft capital in mind of being a Tyreek Hill-esque type of player. He's one of the furthest things I've seen from that right now. And if he's not able to contribute on special teams and he's causing negative plays offensively, I mean, you have to start to consider, do you try Greg Ward in that spot? Do you look to move a Kenny Gainwell in the slot to generate some sort of production? Because you're just not getting much of anything from Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I think that I saw somebody tweet and I was like, this can't be right. That Arcega-Whiteside has that one catch yesterday, which, by the way, was a big catch, and he has more yards on that catch than Reagor has the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, even yesterday, Jalen Reagor had negative yardage, so he's more of a hindrance to the offense than I would say an asset. He did make a nice 12-yard reception. I believe that was against the Broncos, but he does not get open with regularity. He's not a very good route runner, and if you notice, when you routinely come up shorter, you don't get open, or you don't win your matchups. It's only natural that Jalen Hurts is not going to look his way or not necessarily have the confidence to fire the ball into a tight window with him as the intended receiver. I mean, if you're the Eagles, you have to figure out a way to shake something up there because he's just a non-entity when he's out there, and you need to have another offensive threat in the receiving game out there, just for teams to keep the defense honest.
The point you mentioned Ward, you wonder if adding him to the offense would just give them something a little different. Ward is a guy who isn't a big play guy, but he's a chain mover. I mean, he'll run good routes, he'll catch the ball. He might just add a different dimension. Give Jalen Hurts just another guy that he has trust in. You know what I'm saying? He might not even trust that Reagor at this point.
Well, that's what I mean, and that's I'm starting to get that sense just from watching. He's not even looking in his direction. He's more apt to go to other guys because Jalen Reagor, he's not a very good route runner. He's not technically savvy in any aspect of his game, and he's also not sure-handed. So I mean, if I'm the quarterback, he's my last read if I have my options. But I mean, Greg Ward is a tough, limited player, but he's tough. He's going to go over the middle. He's going to get those tough catches. He's going to block in the running game. He's going to do everything that you want in a receiver to do. He just is not overly explosive. He's not a vertical slot or anything close to that. But I think if you're looking to put a guy out there, you're going to get a guy who's going to move the chains and be a productive player. So I think you have to consider making that move at this point in the season.
Well, and the point you make is a good one, Andrew. This team doesn't need another explosive receiver so much the way it's different if the offense is some aerial attack and you're looking for some downfield. You need a guy that's more competent. You need a guy that you trust in this particular offense. That's that's
safety
reward
valve,
to me.
a safety valve.
Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
Help your quarterback as someone who's going to be a reliable set of hands when your quarterback is going off script and making throws off platform. You know that a guy like Greg Ward is going to find the soft spots in the zone. He sees the game through the eyes of a quarterback. Remember, he was a very prolific quarterback at the University of Houston. So I think that all is factored into his route running and the way that he sees the game. And I think he would be a good asset for Jalen, especially now as he's sort of gradually finding his footing in the passing game.
That's a good point by you. Andrew DiCecco, of course, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. And, of course, the Eagles getting ready for the Giants. 5-6 Philadelphia. I guess we've been kind of hinting at it for a couple of weeks here, Andrew, but it appears that it's time for the listeners out there to succumb to what's obvious here. This team is now in the thick of the playoff race.
It's true, and you know what? They need to treat every game as if it's a playoff game. They can't afford to take their foot off the gas pedal like they started to do in the second half of last week. You can't play down to the level of your opponents. You have to stay hungry and pretty much take every game, take everything one game at a time and not look ahead. And I think they're going to do that because they have a good balance of veterans who have been there before and young players who who have come from winning programs in college. And I think it all stems from the mentality of their head coach right now. They're all buying in, and he's keeping everyone grounded.
Hey, he's come a long way. Obviously, he had the flower comment. He got ripped by a lot of people for that. And since that time, it seems that this team has kind of, the team a couple of years ago, they had the dog mask. This team's got the flower mask, right?
I guess. Whatever works.
All right, Andrew. Well, happy Thanksgiving to you, man. We enjoy, of course, our conversations each week, and we will have the day off on Thursday. So, Andrew, we probably won't catch up again. And happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, and we appreciate your work. You guys do a great job over there at Inside the Birds.
Oh, man, same to you, Mike. I really appreciate it. And happy Thanksgiving to all the listeners out there. I appreciate it.
All right, there's Andrew DiCecco, everybody. DiCecco NFL. Follow him on Twitter and the guys over at InsideTheBirds.com. It's Football at 4. It's powered by our friends over at InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast, which those guys do a great job. They had the pregame show on Sundays live on the YouTube channel.